Mount Everest, November 9th, 1951. On the Menlung Glacier, at an altitude of 18,000 feet, British explorers Eric Shipton and Michael Ward came across a mile-long trail of unusual footprints. Not expecting to find humans in this remote corner of the mountain, the climbers examined the prints to determine what made them. To their surprise, the footprints were in the shape of a large human-like foot, one roughly twice the normal size.
The footprints suggest that, in fact, we're dealing with a large primate, one that shares with us not only the habit of walking on two legs, but has some superficial resemblance in its foot to our footprints, only much larger scale, but differ from the other great apes in the lack of a divergent big toe, suggesting they're adapted to a wholly terrestrial environment, living on the ground.
Photographs brought back from the expedition launched a media sensation and marked the beginning of the Bigfoot phenomena. But where do these giant footprints come from? Could they be a hoax? Or is there some mysterious unknown creature living in the remote wilderness? According to the histories and myths of the Himalayan region, one such ape-like creature is the Yeti, more commonly known as the abominable snowman.
The notorious Himalayan Yeti, it's often described as being less than 6 feet in height, much more aggressive when encountered.
All of these sightings really make for a creature which seems to be hiding from us. There's a creature which is hiding in plain sight. And obviously the direct evidence comes in the form of its footprints, hence why it's quite often referred to as Bigfoot.
People often ask, why don't we catch Bigfoot? Bigfoot could be some sort of supernatural creature like a phantom, you know. If Bigfoot is, however, a flesh and blood animal, then I would have to say their numbers would have to be few and far between.
Since the Mount Everest discovery, there have been numerous sightings of large ape-like creatures on every continent, many clustered in the Pacific Northwest area of the United States, including Mount Shasta in Northern California.
In 1979, I was up on the side of Mount Shasta on the foothills, trying to get to the base of the mountain. It was so dense and so tough. As we're standing there, we heard this crashing sound. Simultaneously, we smelled this awful smell. I mean, it was foul. But what was horrifying was whatever it was coming at us through this impenetrable hedge. And then we heard the most blood-curdling combination of an elephant trumpeting, a lion roaring. And it was so loud, it bounced off the foothills 2 miles away. That was probably the most terrified I've ever been in my life. And the next thing I knew, we were headed down the mountain, almost skidding off corners.
I had heard from sheriffs about a rancher in Montana who had gone out to go hunting, comes around a ridge, has an 8-foot tall, reddish-brown, primate-looking, long-haired creature standing right in front of him. Picks up a .30-06 and just fires. And the creature disappeared in a flash of light. If the Sasquatch, when a bullet is shot at it, disappears in a flash of light, then what in the world are we dealing with, and what do they want?
Uintah County, Utah. Nestled in a deep valley, surrounded by some of the highest mountain peaks in North America, is an infamous 512-acre patch of land known as Skinwalker Ranch. The native Utes warn of a dark presence that exists in this area, where strange sightings in the sky, encounters with terrifying creatures, animal mutilations, and numerous other paranormal activities have been reported for centuries.
Skinwalker Ranch has become this nexus of activity where people are reporting strange things. It's in an area in Utah that's very much like a desert terrain. And what's there now is a high desert prairie kind of area. Now, what it actually is and what's going on there is a whole other question.
It's a very unique place in the world where the phenomenon expresses itself in dramatic form. It's also the most scientifically studied UFO or paranormal hotspot in history.
Native American legends say that there has been an otherworldly presence at Skinwalker Ranch for as long as humans have existed in the area, which, according to archaeological evidence, is at least 10,000 years. And the very first European settlers to pass through this land in the late 1700s had their own bizarre experiences, which they recorded in their journals.
The first Europeans to cross the Uinta Basin, the Franciscan monks, reported seeing things over their campfires at night, really weird objects that we would call UFOs. The Native Americans, the indigenous tribes who've been there, have had these experiences for generations. It has, for as long as humans have lived there, it's been the site of paranormal activity. Strange things in the sky, UFOs.
There are so many stories about Skinwalker Ranch that range from cattle mutilations going on. There's stories that if you dig on the property, you'll get sick. Even strange stories of cloaked beasts running out of the woods.
You've seen UFOs, they have seen different creatures, they have seen weird things happening up in the sky. So you have all these different phenomena that happen on that ranch, so some have referred to it as a veritable Disneyland of the paranormal.
The most notorious of the paranormal phenomena associated with Skinwalker Ranch is the creature for which the property is named. The association of the Skinwalker with this mysterious plot of land can be traced back to the mid-19th century. In January of 1864, land disputes between Navajos, Utes, and the United States military in Utah and Arizona reached a fateful tipping point. After decades of conflict, the military removed the Navajo people from the area, forcing them to make what became known as the Long Walk to New Mexico.
The Navajos blamed the Utes for helping the military. And so they cursed the land that the Utes lived on up there. And it must have been a pretty strong curse because even today there are really interesting things that happen up there.
Cursing the land, the Navajo witch doctors attempted to conjure an entity called a Yinal Dushiai, or Skinwalker.
The Skinwalkers, they're sort of typically 6 to 7 feet tall, very dangerous. It's described as being wolf-like, but walking on 2 limbs. So inevitably, it sort of provokes imagery of a werewolf.
The subject of Skinwalkers is as serious as a heart attack. This is not something to trifle with. Even talking about them puts me in some danger. The Skinwalker is somebody who is evil. They want to control people, communities, regions, and have that power over people. And they do this by fear.
The Utes to this day are very respectful. They're very mindful. Matter of fact, they stay at an arm's length from the Skinwalker Ranch. They firmly believe that this ground is cursed and that not only the Uinta Basin, but this concentration of this phenomenon, this host, is on the Skinwalker Ranch.
Elizabeth Lake, Southern California. This high desert body of water sits at the junction of the tectonic plates that form the powerful San Andreas Fault. The Mexicans who colonized California in the 1700s called it Laguna del Diablo, Lake of the Devil. And it was said that the devil's own pet would come into this world through a portal at the bottom of the lake.
Local legend says that at the bottom is actually an entrance to the underworld. They call it the Lake of the Devil. And it's said that in the middle of the 18th century, from up until about 1880 onwards, something was happening there which frightened locals.
Some of the rich landowners built ranches there. These ranchers claim to have been harassed and tormented by some sort of monstrous beast that would come out of the water and steal cattle and menace the locals.
The ranchers who claimed to have witnessed this beast called it the Thunderbird, and their description of it was nearly identical to that of the giant bird witnessed by cowboys in Tombstone in 1890.
Eventually, one of the landowners got it in his head that he was going to hunt this creature down and sell it to the circus. So according to the story, this rancher was able to actually fire a few shots at this creature, which seemed to be bulletproof and metallic. The bullets bounced off, and after that encounter, the bird flew east, never to be seen again in California.
Could this so-called Thunderbird really have been the same creature that cowboys shot at in Tombstone? And why was it referred to by locals as the devil's pet?
They didn't have the vocabulary we had today. So when things happened that they couldn't explain, it was called the Devil's Tower, it was called the Devil's Lake, it was called the Devil's this or the Devil's that.
Take it away from religion, and you might find that this was a portal to another dimension, which the locals knew about and might have something to do with the fact that this mysterious entity was present at that very specific location.
If a portal to another dimension or another part of the universe does lie at the bottom of Elizabeth Lake, might it also be possible that the Thunderbird was not really a creature at all, but something even more incredible?
A Thunderbird was enormous. It made enormous noises, so the thunder part of it could sound like a jet engine.
Its eyes was able to literally pierce and emanate fire. We have this large flying winged creature which gives off a thunderous sound and lights fly from its eyes. That to me suggests that we could be dealing with some sort of craft.
Native Indians in North America, they know, of course, the bird. But now something differently arrived. An object which could fly, which is bigger than the eagle, but at the same time makes tremendous noise. So you have the creation of the Thunderbird.
Even when the airplanes first started going out up in the sky here in the Southwest, they referred them to as metal birds. As a matter of fact, when the first fixed-wing craft landed in Zuni, the Indians over there actually went out there and worshipped the airplane.
It makes me think of a concept called cultural tracking, which is the idea that UFOs can mask themselves to appear as almost anything. You go back to ancient China and they talk about the flying dragons. You go back to the ancient Egyptians, they talk about flying boats. You go to the Roman times and they're talking about flying shields. Perhaps that was just their interpretation, or perhaps that's what they actually saw.
In March 2010, a panel of 41 international experts concluded that the impact of an asteroid that smashed into Earth at Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago probably triggered the global climate change that resulted in the mass extinction of the Earth's dinosaurs. But is there also evidence that some dinosaur species survived? And if so, might they also have evolved?
Paleontologists tell us that, oh, these things have been extinct for 65 million years, yet they still crop up. And they appear to be prehistoric animals, dinosaurs literally, that have survived right down to today. Much like the coelacanth and alligators and sharks and turtles also have survived from those same prehistoric times. I believe that ancient prehistoric monsters are still living in remote areas of the world, either in oceans and lakes or jungle areas to today.
In the Highlands of Scotland, the legend of the Loch Ness Monster has long been part of Celtic and Norse folklore. Recorded accounts of sightings can be traced to the year 565, to the Irish monk St. Columba, a powerful leader who founded monasteries in both Ireland and Scotland. In his journals, Columba wrote of an encounter with people burying a man near the shores of the now fabled Loch Ness.
They explained to Father Columba that the man who had died had been swimming in the lake and was attacked by the water beast. Upon hearing this, Father Columba sent his own follower into the lake. When the beast came after this man, Father Columba made the sign of a cross and commanded the beast not to harm the man. The beast fled and was never seen harming another man again.
A lot of people don't realize how big Loch Ness is. It's 23 miles long, a mile wide, and at its deepest point, about 800 feet. And the water is very, very dark and dense. And so it is the prime location where conceivably they didn't need to surface that often. They would sort of bypass detection.
When we're confronted with the Loch Ness Monster or any kind of anomalous creature, the question really is, where does it come from? Is it a remnant of the dinosaur age, or is it something which is out of this world? We know that, for example, St. Columba definitely felt that the lake was sacred and that there was something present there which had a religious connotation, which is why he went to that place to begin with.
The intriguing thing is that there actually have been a significant number of UFO sightings over the loch itself, of strange, brightly lit objects hovering over the water late at night, which clearly aren't helicopters or aircraft or meteorites or anything like that at all. So, in other words, Loch Ness is a weird and spooky place.
Could the so-called sea monsters of Loch Ness possibly be descendants of ancient dinosaurs? Or might it be of another, perhaps extraterrestrial origin? And if so, what might this say about other mythical sea beasts, like the seven-headed Sumerian sea monster, the Leviathan?
The Leviathan is sometimes described as a serpent or a crocodile or a dragon, but it lurks. It is the gatekeeper to a portal to hell. And this gateway to hell is apparently deep in the ocean, and the Leviathan is there forever, lurking.
In Greek myths, the Hydra was described as an ancient sea serpent with many heads. It was said to be a descendant of the earth goddess, Gaia.
Hercules was sent to kill the Hydra, but it was terribly difficult. He would slice off the head, and two heads would form. He had to ask help from his nephew, and his nephew had a brilliant idea: bring a torch. Fire might keep the heads from forming. So Hercules would bash off one of the heads, and his nephew would essentially cauterize the neck so that another one wouldn't form. And in this way, the Hydra was finally defeated.
In the case of a Hydra, we have something which has several heads, which is once again a category of a creature which you would expect not to see. So we're either confronted here with something which was genetically engineered or which genetically went wrong, but clearly it was of such importance that it was adhered to in mythology, where it attained a status over the years, over the centuries, up until this moment in time.
According to Scandinavian legend, the Kraken are legendary sea monsters of gargantuan size and are said to have roamed the seas off the coasts of Norway and Iceland. This fearsome beast was infamous for its attacks on sailing ships.
The danger was not only being attacked by the Kraken, they would come up to the surface and were enormous, the size of small islands. So you could have a collision with a Kraken that wasn't even out to attack you. Another great danger was that if it submerged suddenly, it formed such a great whirlpool that it could pull a ship under.